very much, and I'm sorry to be an interlude before the real entertainment starts with the music. First of all, we're in Big E. This place has been here 50 years. And in any campaign or in any cause or in any community, you need a space. You need a space you can call your own, call our own. And this community centre, community arts project is absolutely there for everybody. But it's got problems. It's got problems basically because we've got a Tory government. Therefore, it has problems over funding and needs our support. They're launching a crowdfunding project to fund the keeping of this centre and keeping it going. So can I ask you all, sometime tonight, tomorrow, whatever, join in, and if you can give it any support, please do so. We need Big E, we need community centres that have Black E. Sorry, I can't read what there's no autocue, how can I possibly give a speech? So please give some support to it, and I want to say a particular thank you to Darlene, Maria and Bill for all the work they put in for this centre over a very long period of time. Now, when the World Transformed project was set up, I got various calls from various people associated with the national media who said, is this a parallel Labour Party conference? Is it a parallel universe? Is it a parallel something else? Is it all full of extremist, far left, intolerant interests? Who's going to be there? And are you running it? And are you controlling who's coming? I said, absolutely not controlling any of it. And it is not my way to try and control the way people do things. I want people to come together with ideas and come together in enthusiasm. And I think, in a strange kind of way, in a digital age, the World Transformed is a wonderful combination of what Labour Party conferences were once like, when there wasn't security walls and so on, and there was this massive outpouring of ideas, inspirations, working parties, seminars and debates about often very, very difficult subjects. And I think this is actually in the great traditions of the left in this country, the great traditions of the socialist movement of this country. But of course, in a digital age, things are done rather differently in the way in which people are mobilised and people come together. And so I think what's happening here these few days is fantastic. And I'm delighted to be at the closing party, Come Together. Thank you very much. It was, of course, that fantastic big song. And the programme for this event is really a wonderful demonstration of all the vibrancy, the ideas that are unleashed when we come together to share our ideas on politics, on art, on sport, on culture, and all those things. And the reason I'm so pleased it's here, because of the history of this centre as a cultural centre, is that I want us not just to be a Labour Party, a political movement that wants economic change, that wants social change, that wants housing, that wants railways, that wants all those things. It's also about the cultural imagination of people and unleashing that imagination and giving them the space for it. And so it's how our children learn music, it's how we learn to appreciate and engage in art, culture, theatre, and all those imaginative things that lead people on to do fantastic things in the future. We had last year a turning point in British politics. We lost the general election. I was very, very sad about that because I could feel what was coming. I'm sure everybody else could feel what was coming. But we also thought there was a problem. The problem was that we were not offering a proper alternative to what the Tories were doing. Yes, we had a manifesto with many good things in it that I absolutely endorse and agree with, but we were still offering to make cuts, we were still offering to accept the idea of austerity, freezing wages, which has resulted in a lessening of living standards, a lowering of living standards, and greater inequality in society. So, the election for leader came around. Eventually I was nominated with nearly 2 minutes to spare, which was an interesting experience. I had nothing to do for 1 minute 50 seconds. I'm still reflecting on the last break I had in my life. And we contested the leadership, and it was an amazing experience, because to begin with it was the hustings organised by the party, which were important and very well attended, but there's nothing beyond that. And then we organised a meeting in Nottingham to say, anybody who is interested in supporting this campaign, please come along. We booked a room for 100 people and 300 turned up. And after that, it grew and grew and grew. And it was all about offering an alternative political space. It was offering space for people to come together with their ideas. And as you know, the past year has not been without its interesting events. But I want to say this, a couple of things. One, a year ago, our economic strategy was accepting austerity. Now, it is resolutely anti-austerity and redistribution. A year ago, we abstained on the welfare reform bill that was taking 12 billion out. We are now opposing them on welfare reform. And only a few months later, we managed to defeat them on the working tax credits, and as a result, 3 million families are £1,000 better off this year than they otherwise would be. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened because of campaigning everywhere, such as, well, it's all of us. It's not me, it's all of us, okay. Then I'll just give you a couple of other examples, because I know you want the music afterwards. A couple of other examples. When they came and said, for goodness knows what reasons, they wanted every school in the whole country to become an academy, we opposed them. The NUT conference was that weekend, absolutely opposed. Other teaching unions came on board. There was a huge public outpouring on this for the reasons that we didn't want forced academisation. We want effective local education authorities, a family of education, and we didn't want teachers' pay and conditions destroyed by the localisation into academies rather than national pay bargaining for teachers, teaching assistants and all the others working in schools. And you know what? Within a few weeks they capitulated, given up and gone away on that one. And then during the budget, George Osborne, do you remember him? Who's George Osborne? He then, quite bizarrely, in the middle of a budget speech, suddenly announced that personal independence payments would end. And it would take about 4 billion out of the expenditure on people with disabilities who want to live independently. Well, I can remember the time when there was no legislation to protect those with disabilities from discrimination. There was very little public support for them, and many lived in very difficult circumstances, and their families often had to give up work in order to support and care for people because there was insufficient support from the public as a whole. Over the years, brilliant campaigning by people with disabilities changed that, and we won the principle of independent living and independent payments. They were going to take all that away. We forced them back on that. We're not out of the woods yet, because the cuts are still taking place in some respects, because there are still attacks on people with disabilities. And so we've got to work with DPAC, Disabled People Against the Cuts, with the work I really praise the way they've done their campaigning and the message they've got across. So we achieve things when we do things together. So what goes on next? Well, Yes, today in conference, I put forward an NEC statement of the 10 points on which we contested the leadership election. Those 10 points are about equality, are about economy, are about justice, are about human rights, are about a human rights strategy internationally which is designed to support peace and democracy rather than wars and invasion. And as you know, during the year, I pledged we would do it, and we did it, was to give an apology over Iraq on the day the Chilcot report came out. And I do urge those that have a certain precondition to try and do things the bad way to read Chilcot, not the whole of it. They can read the 800 paragraph summary, that's a good start. But I'd also urge them to read the Select Committee report on Libya, because we're living in an era when we've been through the wars in Afghanistan, the wars in Iraq, the war in Libya, and of course the dreadful war that's going on in Syria. I want those wars to end. I want them to end by a political solution, and I also want there to be a humanitarian response to the refugee crisis, not the vague culture of nuclear. We now have to develop the policy ideas and develop the democracy within the party and our movement, so that we recognise that now nearly 600,000 people who've joined the Labour Party have an effective voice within the party. An effective voice to make sure they are heard and to make sure that the policies we develop are based on the real-life experience of people who are dealing with the housing crisis, dealing with insecure employment, dealing with underinvestment, and dealing with community tensions brought about by the activities of the far right in some cases, or just the growth of xenophobia within our society. So movements have an important role to play in this. If there's a shortage of school places, there's not enough doctors, there's a crisis in the local hospital, what do? Do you turn around and look for a convenient local scapegoat minority, or do you do something else? Bring people together to demand resources for your communities to provide those things. But I want us to also develop policies which are about empowerment of people. So John McDonnell talks very well about empowerment of people, so that workers can take over organisations when they change hands, that we do develop cooperatives within our society. We do look to cooperative housing and cooperative working as a way forward. And we've also put forward an energy policy which we launched in Nottingham with Alan Simpson, and Barry Gardner has taken it forward a bit further on local energy companies, energy co-ops, and crucially development of sustainable renewable energy sources throughout our country and our society. And so what's been achieved is a good start. And I've been re-elected as the leader of the party, but I've been I want to say two things about that. Firstly, I'm very honoured to have the position, I'm very honoured to undertake the work as best as I possibly can. But I'd also say it's about we. It's not about an individual, it's about all of us and what we're able to achieve together. And so, this event here, World Transform, is a way of people coming together. We've got lots of activities to undertake as the months go on. I want us to start with challenging this Tory government on the idea that the solution to education issues in Britain is to separate children at the age of 10 or 11 on the basis of perceived abilities or perceived lesser abilities. What a dreadful message to a 10 or 11-year-old, and the majority will be told they are failures in that exam. Bring them together, fund the schools properly, open the eyes and imagination of all of our children. The last thing I'd say is this. It is about how we are able to do things together that makes us much stronger. So, as we campaign together, let's reach out to every one of us. When somebody is suffering, going through a mental health crisis, don't make jokes about it, don't discriminate about it, treat them with the esteem they deserve. When there is growth of hatred and hate crime, challenge it. But above all, make sure that we all understand where our rights and so on come from, because I want to see a different way of dealing with history and communications in our society. I'll give you an example of how it's working really well. The Durham Miners' Gala was an act of protest when it was first set up. Let me explain. When it was first established, it was the miners marching into the big city of Durham, showing that they were the ones that created the wealth, that the wealthy lived on in Durham. And they marched and they had the big meeting, the annual Durham Miners' Gala, an amazing event it has always been, where all those pits marched in with their banners. Then came the miners' strike, then came the solidarity of the miners' strike, and then came the devastation of the defeat of the miners. What also happened was, whilst the mines might have closed, they had, the solidarity of the communities remained there in the same way. And my great friend, the late great Davy Hopper, who died sadly just after this year's Miners' Gala, he said, we don't want the Durham Miners' Gala to be a memorial for an industry where we have an ever-diminishing number of people coming along every year, remembering what it once was, like a sort of sad funeral after funeral after funeral. He said, no, our principle was the solidarity of our community. And so, we will bring everybody else to the Durham Miners' Gala for whatever cause they are campaigning for or fighting for. And this year's Durham Miners' Gala had 250,000 people at it, the biggest for a very long time. And those festivals remind us of the history of where our movements come from, the sacrifices that were made to form trade unions, to get the right to vote, to get women the right to vote, to bring in anti-racist legislation, all those great campaigns and acts of solidarity. That is where our rights come from. And if you want to change society, you don't wait for somebody up there to do it for you. You campaign to do it in the principles that have always been done. And so, this come together tonight is coming together to celebrate what we have achieved together, celebrate what we're determined to achieve in the future. And I want to finish by saying an enormous thank you to these events don't happen by accident. To those in the Momentum office in London, to those in the Momentum local groups, to those that have had the vision and ambition to promote the world transformed, for making sure it all happened. And it's happened, people have come together, they're leaving here inspired, enthused, informed, determined that we're going to deal with inequality, deal with injustice, deal with homelessness, deal with the problems that so many face, that they cannot get the homes they need, cannot get the jobs they absolutely need, and we all need them to get. When we're together, we're very, very strong. When we blame each other, we're very, very weak. Stay united, stay together, stay determined. Thank you very, very much. I've been given a second job as a continuity person, and I've been asked to introduce the next band. They're called Stealing Sheep. I can only suggest, I didn't know this for a fact, they're called Stealing Sheep because at one time in Britain it was a hanging offence to be found stealing a sheep. That was the power of the landowners over the people at that time. We've turned it round. welcome to